In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Now I want to continue with page 28 and 29. Well, actually, at the bottom of the page 28, there are, in fact, some, analysis against this conversation analysis, which is taken up, which is adopted by a group of linguists. And this continues on page 29. Anyway, we actually have something with less problems of CA. CA has got not the problems of exchange structure, and many linguists adopt and like this one. So if you actually look at page 28, for example, they say number 1 or the last paragraph, say many linguists would contend Cook's property of not primarily necessitated by a particular task. They say, well, there are some tasks in the conversation. Okay, that's okay. Keep it as a kind of one part that we could have against, one thing that we could have against CA approach. Number 2 is on the next page, which begins with Fairclaw's 1989, page 12, which Fairclaw would say that the property of any unequal power of participants is partially suspended. Number 2 is not always right with the conversations. Okay, so this is another problem with CA. But these two problems, problem 1, not primarily necessitated by a particular task, and number 2, any unequal power of participants is partially suspended. Well, these two things are in fact not a kind of thing that we say conversation analysis is so bad. Okay, we keep to use it as you see on the next page, page 29, with turn taking. Okay. Earlier in my, courses with me with linguistics, we talked about turn taking. So we are going to continue with this approach of turn taking, and you actually know that turn taking is something that we do in our conversations, and we actually have a short review of materials. So turn taking, you actually know the definition, and we are going to continue with the definition. Well, so page 29, line 1 of turn taking says, cooperation in a conversation is managed by all participants through turn taking. So if I say something, you just stop saying. Okay, so it means that it is my turn. Okay, so when I am done, you actually continue to say something. Okay, and at that time I stop. This is turn taking. Okay, so it's my turn, it's your turn, it's my turn, it's your turn, it's my turn and your turn, one after another in the conversation. Okay, so we have sometimes want to have only one person speaks at a time. Okay, this is the case that only one person speaks in a conversation at a time. It's like this. So we have to have something like holding the floor in our conversations. So we're taking the floor. Okay, line 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, line 4 of turn taking, or line 5 of it. Take the floor, line 5, or hold the floor, line 4. Well, in this approach to the conversation with turn taking, we have something like number 2, a transition relevant place, or TRP, the second paragraph, line 2, line 1 and 2. So the conversation is like this. A point in a conversation where a change of turn is possible is called transition relevance place. It's the time that I stop, and it's the time that you begin to say something. Sometimes this is the opposite. You want to say something, I just stop. Okay? At this point is called, at this place, and this point is called transition relevance place. Okay? So, where is the transition relevance place? At the end of a sentence, at the end of the clause, at the end of the utterance, at the end of the utterance. Okay? So, it's like this. Do we have special things special signs in the conversation to show these elements of transition relevant places? Yes. If you actually go to the paragraph beginning with a point in a conversation, okay? So the last paragraph, there are a couple of slashes like this, slanted lines like this, Well, these slanted lines are the places in the conversation where we have transition relevance places. You want to see it? I will give you one example. There's a conversation between a person called B and another person called A. If you want to write it like this, like a conversation analysis, we write this type of conversation the way it is on page 29 between B and A. B says something like this. Yes, tell me what it is you want. Tell me what it is you want. At this time, A interrupts and continues to say something. When at the end of what it and the beginning of is you want, you see a couple of slanted lines or slashes. Okay? Now, like this. Below it, again, there's a couple of other slanted lines. What does it mean? This is the transition relevant place for B to stop and for A to continue, to begin. Okay? It's like this. So, transition relevant places appear somewhere at the end of the sentence or at the points that the sentence could be, in fact, divided into two parts. Okay. Going to the line below the conversation between B and A, we have something like this. When hearers, line 1, when hearers predict that the turn is about to be completed and they come in before it is, this is an overlap. There is an overlap between the first part of the conversation by B and another person by A. This is an overlap. Okay? In the following example, adapted from Schifrin, 1994, page 24, 240. The overlap is indicated by the equal sign. The equal sign shows that there is a kind of overlap. Let us see, not slanted lines like that. Interviewee, but not no more. But not no more. Yeah. Okay. And the interviewer actually begins at the end to begin some of what's happened to them. Okay? So, above it, it is written something like this. In the following example, well, there's an overlap indicated but with a equal sign, the equal sign. Now below it, it is written, note that the ordinary classroom, doctor-patient exchange, and quiz show, TV quiz show, there are neither overlaps nor interruptions. Okay, what is it like? In the conversations, if I actually say something, and in the middle of what actually I would say, your friend, my friend, actually continues to say something. But never ever these types of things happen in the classroom. Well, the teacher actually, when he is talking, all the students have to actually keep silent. And there is no turn taking at this time. Until the teacher actually allows you to, in fact, allows the students, to, in fact, have their turns or have their questions. Okay? This is partly because of the power structure between the teacher and the student. In the conversation, we do not have this type of power structure. Okay? It's like this. So, if you can actually continue to read this page until you go to the end of this page. When the last paragraph of the page 29 actually begins, it says something like this. Each culture seems to have an unwritten agreement about the acceptable length of a pause between two turns. Okay? So it depends from one culture to another culture. How much pause there is between what I say and you actually want to say something else. In any culture, if the pause is intended to carry meaning, analysts call it attributable silence. Okay? Sometimes I want you to keep listening to me to understand what I say. Then I stop. I stop saying something. This is an attributed silence. Well, in my conversation just now, you had something like less than a minute ago, there was a silence which is something like an attributable silence. But actually, if you go to the next page, on page 30, you actually see that there is a kind of silence out there. What is the conversation? Did you have a good time last night? B. 30 seconds of silence. Yeah. So he asked you out. He asked you out then. B. He did. Okay. So when actually the second line, there is a kind of 3 seconds of silence. And that's why we have number 3. Already actually we talked about the parentheses and the numbers inside, showing that how much time actually passes in order for somebody to answer you. Okay? Well, below it is written, B pauses for 3 seconds before her yeah. Okay, before her is saying yeah. And A attributes to this silence an affirmative answer and very positive sentiment. So he knows that this girl was sent out. Okay? In the cultures, line 2, in which there is a low level of tolerance of silence between turns, if there is a lull in the conversation extending past about 10 seconds, the speakers tend to utter something like, okay, so there, or so there you go, or other things as kind of fillers, okay, in order to break the silence, to fill the silence with something. For those who do not know each other well, a line non-attributed silence can feel awkward, bad. Okay, so this was in fact the structure of turn-taking. In the turn-taking page, what time is it? It is 16 minutes now. In the turn-taking, we had something like transition relevance place, TRP, and attributed silence, etc., and interruptions and things like that. Anyway, now let us go to our next topic, which is adjacency pairs. Adjacency pairs are the things that actually the students actually follow. MA students sometimes follow in their theses. They want to see what type of adjacency pair the students have when they actually, there's something like the conversation in their conversation classes. Okay, you are going to be teachers of English, or you actually are teachers of English, and you want to continue your education for your MA. So adjacency pairs are something nice. Anyway, and we already talked about it again in our previous course with you as adjacency pairs. Anyway, line 1 says, CA analysts say that there is a relationship between acts, and the conversation contains frequently occurring patterns. There are patterns of conversation like exchange structure, but they are quite different. They are in the form of adjacency pairs. In pairs of utterances, known as adjacency pairs, the word adjacency means near, neighboring, close to something. Okay, close to, near, and adjacency pair, maybe it means something like adjacency means jawar, maybe in Arabic. I don't know, of course, the Fusha, but maybe something like this. So adjacency pairs are two actually parts of the conversation, but one part is related to the other. Okay. If you actually look at page 30, and there's something like a list of pairs of, in fact, adjacency pairs, okay? Pairs of things like questions and answers. If somebody in a conversation line 1 has got something like a question from you, you are supposed to provide an answer. So question and answer are actually, because they are two, they call it pair, and because they are close to each other, we call them as something like adjacency pairs, like question and answer. So line 1 says something like this: a question has the preferred response of an answer. Okay, what does it mean? If I actually ask a question, there's a previous response by you as an answer in the conversation. If you actually ask a question from me, I am supposed to provide an answer for you. Now this is the case with line 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., up to the end of this list. An offer, in fact, has the preferred response of an acceptance. If I say something like this, shall we go to have our dinner out? Do you want to have something out for the dinner? What is the preferred response by the person listening to me? Okay, the person could say yes to this offer. So we say an offer has the preferred response of an acceptance. This is the case with an invitation. Okay, again an acceptance. Or an assessment, evaluation, again an agreement. Or there's something like a proposal for you. What is that? The result is an agreement. Or maybe there's a kind of greeting by somebody seeing you. Hello, how are you? What is the answer? Hello is something like hi, fine, thank you. Okay, so a greeting has the preferred response of of a greeting. Okay. Next is a complaint. What is it? If I complain about something, okay, I don't want this, I don't want that. Why did you do something like this? Complain. Okay. What do you say? An apology. An apology. Okay, a complaint requires or has the preferred response of an apology. And if there's something like a blame on one part of the participants of the conversation, it has got the preferred response of a denial. That's it. Sometimes we have preferred responses, sometimes we have dispreferred responses. Okay, so a blame, and if you blame somebody and the person says, good, thank you very much, this was something that is my, in fact, fault, so this is dispreferred in the conversations. Why? Because normally if there's something like a blame on you, you actually have denial. Okay, anyway, this is the adjacency pairs because we already know it. It's not so difficult for you to understand, and there are other preferred and dispreferred responses for you on page 30 and part of page 31 before sequences actually begin, which is on page 31. Let us stop it, and in my next one we are going to go to that part.